see so many people here today. This is fantastic. I think we owe it to John's topic and also his notoriety, right? John is family. I am related to him through my Aunt Lizzie, who is his Aunt Lizzie. I'm related on the Jones side, he's related on the Downs side. So it all boils out of Cofield, North Carolina, doesn't it? I'm right. John grew up in Gatesville, and he's the son of Julia and Harry Ford. Can everyone hear me? Come on up. If you can't hear, we don't have a microphone system. You may want to try to come up and sit closer. I'll be louder. His mother and her brothers, Philip, Horace, and John, were the children of Ada and John Downs of Cofield. His father, Harry, was the postmaster in Gatesville. John lives in Raleigh and has been an English teacher and librarian. Among his activities in Raleigh are historic guide at the North Carolina Capitol, historian at Christ Episcopal Church, founded in 1821, Wake County Genealogical Society, and Friends of Oberlin Village. Let's welcome John Ward today.
Well, thank you, Libby. It is, can you hear me in the back pretty well?
Yes.
It's so nice to be here, and it's so nice to be here at this church. And my family has been associated with this church for a long time. Both my grandparents were buried out at this church, and my mother grew up in this church. So nice to be here. But briefly, we got some people that came across the river today. And I'm just going to stick with the Gates County folks and just all right, Nancy, stand up and tell everybody who your Hertford County people are.
Nancy Ray, my mom was from Winton. She was a band. Her daddy's a Bill. So they're from Winton.
All right, and then Penny.
That's your house, bud.
Penny.
Totally from Gatesville.
Yeah. But Penny is president of the Gates County Historical Society, which has a good, thriving group over there. And Kay Hollowell.
Kay Barker from Hollowell from Gates County. I have no connections to Winton that I know of other than I might have found folks from here.
And Peggy and Miss Silent are right back there in the back. And Peggy, would you introduce your mother, please?
I'm Peggy Silent Leffler. This is my mother, Edith Holmes Freeman Silent. Her brother was Julian Freeman, who taught, and Margaret Freeman, who taught at Hotchie High School for years. And my mother was the president of Gates County Historical Society for 4 years. She is now 100 years old. Wow.
And Evelyn.
I'm Evelyn Godwin Kent. I grew up in Gatesville. And Kay now lives in the house I grew up in, so that's real exciting for me. My mother was from Winton. She was a Newsom, Frances Newsom, so she grew up here, and we have many fond memories of coming across the river to visit cousins.
And Evelyn, who is with you today?
This is my husband, Frank Kent, and we live in Jarrett, Virginia now.
Okay, so we did have a lot of Hertford County connections over in Gatesville. So I'm so glad Libby asked me to do this, and I learned some stuff doing this, which is always fun. And what I'm sort of going to do today, so often you hear the front end of a presentation. I'm going to sort of take you in the storage room and sort of approach it from that way. Like, where did we get all this information? What sources do we go to? And where can I find stuff? But in Winton, Hertford County, as you know, the burned down courthouse really presents problems. And I'm really lucky in Raleigh because I'm in Cameron Village, real near downtown, and I can get to state archives easily. And about 1940, the state archives realized that, you know, in all these counties, there sat the courthouse, but they had run out of storage room, and all these records were being stored across the street in the back of an old garage or something. And so these records were in such danger. And so the state started collecting all these records and bringing them into Raleigh. And so I can go down to state archives and I can search Hertford, Gates, and Chowan counties easily from, well, I say easily, we've got to sort of put Hertford in its own little category. But they are all there pretty much from the 1700s to the 1950s. And so many of my friends who are researchers think Gates County is a dream to research in because they kept every little slip of paper, and we've got such a valuable collection of research documents. Okay. All right, here's the state archives. And the state archives is accessible to everyone. The search room is up here now. They've changed stuff around. But all you need is a driver's license, and they register you, and you keep that number, and you just register every time you go in. And North Carolina is really pretty open with its records and letting people have access to them. And but that has been a blessing. I go to, as Libby mentioned, the old Episcopal Church in Raleigh, right across from the state capitol. And we just did a huge addition about 3 years ago. And our records go back to 1820, 1821. And then, in planning for this edition, they came to me and said, "John, where are our records going to be stored during this transition?" I thought, God has sent me my sign. I know where I want them stored. So I picked my committee. You know, that's a good technique. And I got some people that appreciated the value of history, and my church graciously donated them to the state archives. And so you can go there and search all the church records. The only thing you have to have permission for is the last 25 years. I thought, nobody cares about the last 25 years. But that's just fine with me. And about 2 years ago, we had that huge fire near downtown Raleigh, and I could see the flames in Cameron Village from downtown. And I thought that could be my church and those records being burned up, but luckily it wasn't. So protecting the records is so valuable. Okay, Libby. Now these are the things that are in Raleigh, and they're on microfilm. Right, microfilm is not the most user-friendly way to search records, but sometimes that's all you have. And you just crank or push the buttons and push the buttons, and sometimes you get a little seasick because all that stuff's flying in front of your face. But election records are interesting. Okay. Most of them are one reel, but there's a few that are more than that. Okay.
John,
Yes.
what does it mean, records of accounts?
Well, sometimes you don't know exactly what you're going to find in a book. It could be the accounting for an estate. Estate records are really interesting. And another thing to me that's interesting that are just tedious, well, records of accounts, what would you say they are?
That would be the records of people who died
Okay.
and how their estates were administered,
Okay.
what was there and where it went.
Okay.
Their wills.
And I like tax records, but they are sure tedious going through. But through the tax records in Chowan County, I've been able to determine who my great going back grandfather was. Because somebody is paying tax on that land. And I knew the land was like 175 acres. So I just kept going back all through the 1800s from what I knew all the way back to see who's paying tax in that township on 175 acres. And I'm pretty sure I've nailed it. So, but anyway, so all right.
Really?
Yes. All right, now census records. Census records you can get to on Ancestry. Yeah. And, but there's some supplements. Agricultural census records are really interesting. Just like so many of you in this room, our ancestors had farms. And it's number of acres and number of acres of improved land and how many bales of hay were produced, how many corn, honey, how many milk cows did they have, pigs. So you get a great picture of a family farm. And then that's a summary of the businesses in a county or in a township. And then you get the statistics, how many churches and schools are in the community, morality records, and individuals, including slaves, who died within that year. So,
Is it mortality, John? Mortality?
mortality, yes. Morality, and I said, it's mortality, thank you. And then the slave schedule, and I'll show you one of those in a minute. Okay. All right. 1790 is our first U.S. census. And then the 1850 census is the first census. All the census prior to that were head of household. And then they had children, and you want to know the names of those children and the birth years. Starting in 1850, that's when they started listing the children. And but North Carolina did a state census, which is not the federal census, but that's definitely worth looking at. And now records are only as good as the people who entered that information. Just like me, imagine I made a mistake. So did that census man. So just accept that, it's going to happen. And there's pretty much no 1890 census because the building where they were stored in Washington was burned, and to my knowledge, we don't have any surviving North Carolina 1890 census. So,
Do you want me to go back?
no. All right, here you get inheritance tax and settlements again. Oh, and indigent children. If you're a ward of the county, they're gonna keep, the county's gonna keep an accounting of that. And, there's also a thing called bastardy bonds, which they are what you think they are. And I remember the first time I looked at those from Hertford County, lo and behold, the first piece of paper lying there on the top was somebody in my family. Don't go looking if you're not ready for what you find. Okay, let's see. And then you've got your court records, and you have your different court dockets. And P and Q is just the pleas and court session records. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. The record of corporation, partnership records, here are P and Q records again, and elections. And so there are a lot of things on microfilm if you're willing to spend the time to look at it. And in Hertford County, everything is so valuable. Okay, Libby. Another thing that helped me, here in Hertford County, my mother's family were Downs and Overtons. All right. My cousins live out at the old Downs farm. And it was, and I know that farm came through the Overton line, but I don't know who my Overton people were. And here's that farm sitting right there. And the Downs I can trace, okay, it's the Overtons. I cannot find any piece of paper that gives me proof that this Overton was connected to that Overton. But there are Overtons living all around out in that section. And so I'm lost on my Overton side. And the first Overton I can trace was Amon Overton. And that name Amon keeps popping up in the Overtons, but there's no definitive proof to me yet how it zigzagged around there. And I can't find any Overton cemeteries that seem to be my line. So, okay, let me. All right, your deeds and your grantor and grantee and your mortgages, and there are some books like over here. Margaret Hoffman, who was over in where? Roanoke Rapids, over that way, yeah. She did all these abstracts, which are great books, but they are tedious. And it's an abstract of the deed, and it's much easier to use her books. So, and you know, before we had the counties, we had the precincts. So, she did a whole bunch of these abstract guides that are excellent. Okay. And then you're going to get to your marriages. But see, so many of the counties, I just picked this one up today, have these marriage records that are transcribed, and they're much easier to read than the original. And if you have a question, you can always go to the original. And it's listed by groom and by bride. And back then, if a gentleman were getting married, he'd have to put up a bond, basically to say, you know, I'm putting up money because if I don't show up, I'm going to lose my money on this marriage. Those women were after the man one way or another, so.
Was it the same amount?
That's a good question. And so, but Hertford County, you do not have one of these. Yates County, Chowan counties have these. And they're so nice to use. You can write them, and it's just so much easier to read. And then you can also look at who was the bondsman, who was putting up that money. That man that was putting up the money was not some stranger to the guy getting married. There had to be some connection there. And then you can look at the witnesses. But the bondsman, to me, is more of a clue in helping decipher that. Okay? All right. For those of you searching for Confederate soldiers, there is that 6-set volume of North Carolina troops that the state archives did, and it is indexed. And with Hertford County, the different troops in Hertford County, it gives a little biography of the soldier and when that soldier enlisted, and sometimes the occupation of the soldier, but hey, most of them were farmers. So, but that's a great set, and the library should have that, hopefully. Okay. All right. Oh yeah, here are some things you can access from your computer. Find a Grave, FINDAGRAVE.com. And I walked back to the cemetery back here, and I don't know if that's on there, but you can search by county, and then you can search by surname, and on my mother's side, on her maternal side, all those folks are over at Como. And there's a family cemetery out between the cornfield and the swamp. And I named it the Taylor Family Cemetery Farm. And I listed all the graves in that cemetery and put pictures with them, and Find a Grave, I hate to say, it used to be better than it is now, but they improved it, but they really didn't. But it's a valuable resource. And then you are here near East Carolina. East Carolina has a beautiful North Carolina section. And in East Carolina, you can create an account and register, and then you can look at the catalog, and they're called finding aids. We have got this collection, and this is what is in the collection. It's a guide to what's in the collection, which guides you to what's in the boxes and the folders. And you can say, I'm coming on Wednesday, such a day. Could you have these folders for me? East Carolina is so friendly and so helpful. And when I get there, they'll have a cart with all my stuff on it ready to go. They are just excellent. And there are Hertford County collections there too. And with special collections, you don't know what is going to end up where. And sometimes you can't really figure out the logic there, but hey, it's at this institution and it's worth looking at. But yeah, there's some excellent Hertford County things in East Carolina. And I like FamilySearch.org, which was the Mormon site, and you register for free. You can create a family tree for free, and their family tree I like because you're right in the middle, and it's got your mother's maternal and paternal lines going this way, and then your father's, and so it's very visual. And the thing about that is, it's not you just working in isolation on a certain person. There are other people working on this too. And if you question why somebody said so-and-so, you can add that to the notations for clarification. And I have found things on there that I have not found in Ancestry. And Ancestry is fine if you do your own work. Don't cheat. Because, man, when I got on Ancestry, I thought I had hit pay dirt. And I was finding all this stuff, the downs, and all like this. And I thought, oh, this is all correct. And I was just sucking that into my family tree. Well, it wasn't all correct. And you get it's like getting a virus that you just can't get out. So the easiest way I saw that was I just deleted everything. Now you can look at that stuff to get some hints and then go on, you do your own research to prove it, but don't just blind copy it. You'll be in trouble. And now, since I'm a librarian, use your local library and ILL, which is interlibrary loan, and is free. And you can have 4 requests at a time. And with a lot of the specialty history books, some of those are really expensive, and I just may want to look at them one time to see if there's material that I need in it, and I don't want to have to pay $100 for this book. You could, once you get registered, you can do your own request. The library doesn't even have to do it. You just go to the library and pick it up. It's interlibrary loan. It's excellent. And now, one of my magazines I like is Family Tree. It's sort of like the Reader's Digest of genealogy. It's engaging but not overwhelming. And so the things are easy to digest. They've got great forms, and they'll have articles. I had a misinterpretation of the Wake County Genealogical Society. I thought everybody there was going to be from North Carolina and have North Carolina roots. Well, far from it. They're Italians, they're Poles, they're Russians, heritage, all. But it's the same strategies. Finding your Italian ancestors, you're going to use the same strategies as finding your Hertford County ancestors. So that's a great little magazine. Okay. Oh, one last thing on this. All right, since we're at Winton Baptist Church, where are the Baptist archives?
Richmond.
Well, Wake Forest has a ton of them. And a while back, for some reason, I thought I needed to know all the ministers at Gatesville Methodist Church. And I thought, well, where are the Methodist archives? I've used the Baptist at Wake Forest, and the Methodists happen to be in Raleigh. So, lo and behold, they sent me a little, remember those ditto machines and everything came out purple? It was one of those little books on the history of Gatesville Methodist Church. So that was from the Methodist archives. And never hesitate to use a library. Recently, I was looking for one of my wards, and she was somebody I never knew. I knew her parents, I knew when she died, but I wanted her obituary. And her father had been a doctor in Suffolk. I emailed the reference librarian at Suffolk. They sent me a copy of the newspaper obituary. But I wasn't asking them to go on a big wild goose chase either. I was very specific in what I was looking for. Okay, so use your archives, and with one of my favorite ones I left off. This will keep you up real late at night. It's called newspapers.com, and it's a bottle of wine a month. Cheap wine. And It's great. It has digitized all these old newspapers, and I can get to the old Murfreesboro newspapers back into the 1800s. And you can do a keyword search, and then you can clip the article and sort of store it in your book bag. It is, but the bad thing about newspapers.com, you find your article, then you start reading what else is around the article. I'll look, oh my goodness, it's 2 a.m. And it's just, but now y'all, the News and Observer is so tight with their archives. And these archives are only going to go up to about 1920 in newspapers.com. But I'll show you some articles I got out of that. But there's a bunch on like the Buckhorn Academy and the Winton schools and different things. And in Wake County, I don't know about here in Hertford County, you can go to the library. They have a library subscription to newspapers.com. And you can't store articles, but you can certainly copy them and save them to a thumb drive. But it's a great resource. Okay, Libby. All right, now this is the old Downs farm, and this is about 1895. And that's what it looked like. And then I'm going to show you some real bad pictures of it. Okay, Libby. We'll get there in a minute. All right, now that's where Eamon Overton lived. We'll talk about all Overton. Now this is an example of a slave schedule that you're going to find in the census.
Sorry.
All right, so here is Eamon Overton. He owned one black male that was 55, one male who was 24, one female who was 26, one female who was 8, one male who was 6, one male who was 4. That's 6 over 12, so this child was 6 months old. A female, little female. So, but now, what is that telling me? Actually, it's not telling me a whole lot. I don't know what their relationships were to each other. What are their names? I have no idea. But that's the census. Like I was talking about agricultural supplement, this is a slave supplement. And you're going to find that in the 1850 and 1860. Okay? Now, this is the early type of census records that would have been in categories. This is going to be your males here and your females over here. And it's like, these are hard to figure out because it's one male between 5 and 10 years old. How many were in this family union? Maybe one, or this maybe 15 to 20 years old. There were 2 males in that household. You don't know if it was 2 brothers or father and son. You just sort of have to see if it fits your pattern. But thank goodness we do have records. And then later on in latter years, did they own or rent? Can they read or write and write? And then when you get up into the 1940s, does the household own a radio? Things like that. And it just gives you a snapshot. I think when they were talking about cutting census funds, that was like jabbing me in the heart. You know, some of us think this is really important stuff. Is it going to change the world? No. But it's fascinating. Okay, Libby. Now this, have you ever seen these?
Yes.
Okay. The Downs farm, when I grew up, one of my cousins who never knew the Downs farm said, what was it like when you were going there as a kid? I said, well, nobody ever lived there when I was growing up. It pretty much looked like that. Lizzie and Philip, if I remember correctly, were going to move there, and they started changing the house, and he died, is that correct? Okay. So, Uncle Philip died when I was probably about 5 years old, so, you know, nobody was living there, so didn't mess around there, okay, living, and then, yeah, there's a close-up of the house. All right. All right, now, here are your court minutes. And I always look to see what has been transcribed. And when you go to the archives, all of Hertford County's books are together, all of Yates County's books together, all of Chowana are together. And 1845 to 49, okay. All right, and this is just a sample page. You can't read this. Maybe I can't either. Okay. All right. Now, here, the county would appoint patrollers, and I was trying to find my dictionary of genealogy, I thought. Oh, don't let me go to tell these folks that my great-great-grandfather was a Ku Klux Klan guy. But patroller, the counties back then, according to where you would live, you were assigned as a male to take care of a certain portion of the road. We didn't have the highway department, and so somebody had to do it. And if you were a landowner along that road, your time would come. They would also appoint people as patrollers who were sort of like deputies. And here's Jesse Downs, who was appointed a patroller, and you would get paid for this. All right, this is for free persons of color who had permission to keep and carry a gun. And it lists, look, it gives you names here, which is great. And then I found out who in my family was appointed to serve on the juries, and this has always interested me, how accounts were settled, or how sometimes estates were settled. Okay, back in 1850, Libby might die. All right, we've got her estate, so who's going to settle it? And they might appoint Patsy and Margaret and Buddy Hugh to settle her estate. And so a lot of times they appointed 3 people to settle someone's estate. And there's another thing called processioners' records, which was land boundaries. And I learned from some of my workshops that in England, when they'd walk the boundary lines, they would always have a kid along. And then when they get to the corner where it met on this corner, they would take, this is horrible, they would take that kid and they'd whip him. And then that kid always remember, I know that this is where that property ended up, because they whooped me good right here. So, okay. All right. Now the Downs, I sound like I'm on top of the Downs family, but I wasn't until about 2 years ago. I could go back to my grandfather, my great-grandfather. Amon, well, that's the Overtons. But the Downs, I couldn't get out of Hertford County. I thought, now where did these Downs come from? Because of the misspelling of the word Downs. Sometimes it was D-E-W, D-O-W, D-O-W, N-E-S, all sorts of variations. And I met this lady on Ancestry who was from Greenville. And we started corresponding, and she had to help try to determine some land records in her family. And lo and behold, we matched up and we were the same line. And but now I didn't know any of this stuff. I didn't know Wiley's name, and Wiley was in what is now Bertie County. And I'd never heard of these people. And then, but Milton Downs, Milton is going to appear. He was one of my great uncles, so that name starts popping up. And, but all that's in the Bertie precinct. And so a lot of times collaboration is really good if the person is a good researcher. And, okay, all right, there's Uncle Horace and Uncle Philip. And no, Uncle Philip, Uncle Horace. I'm wrong. That's Uncle John, Uncle Philip, Uncle Horace. I didn't know them when they were that young. And Mother was the youngest of the three. So, anyway, I have a ton of pictures of Cofield that are just scenes like this, not very revealing. Okay? All right, now, Kenneth Rayner was from Petty Shore, and on this big old map over here is Hertford County during 1863. It's a Civil War map, but it shows where people live and gives the names of those homeowners. But Kenneth Rayner was big in North Carolina politics, and actually, he's the one that really saved the city of Raleigh when it was invaded at the end of the Civil War by General Sherman, occupied Raleigh with like 80,000 troops. A group of city, I was amazed. The lawyer in town was Mr. Downs. The people at the bank, there was a Miss Downs. And when you look at Rhode Island and Massachusetts, there are a whole bunch of Downs up there. And I think one of those ended up down on the shore of North Carolina. And so that I'm still working on that. We'll see what happens. All right. Yeah, and see, here are some of our Hertford County people. All right. Okay, Levy. Oh, I know what I was going to tell you. One of my cousins, St. Patrick's Day, she just said, you know, I'm so we always celebrate St. Patrick's Day to honor our Irish heritage. I'm going, what Irish heritage? Bertie County is not real Irish. And she said, I named my two sons two Irish names. And I thought, came from my cousin who loved to brag, and he wanted to get in some organization in Charleston, and he needed an Irish heritage, and he got him one. So, okay. Now, one of the best places to find Hertford County information in Raleigh is the van collection. And I was down there last week, and they have reorganized that collection. And some of the books weren't put back in the right place, like the tax books. And that tax book is great on Hertford County. And it was divided into districts like Captain Taylor's district, Captain Jones district. And if you look at the names in that district, it's going to correspond closely to townships. And when you've worked in a county long enough, you sort of know what surnames are in what districts. So here's Luke McGlone, who one of my dames married into the McGlones. Anyway, you're going to get, oh, that's for making his coffin. I mean, in these collections, you can find wonderful trivia, okay? But you're going to have to go through a lot of pieces of paper, which is fun, okay?
You ready for me?
Yes, please. All right, now, Holly Springs Church. There was a school at Holly Springs, and I know some of my, I think, sometimes, I think Mother went there for a little while, but her older brothers went there. Does anybody know when that school ceased at Holly Springs? I think Mother said that the school was across the street from the church, across the road from the church. And, all right, Libby. And it was at Sally Archer's Crossroad, okay. Oh, wait a minute, go back one. All right, what happened, part of this slide we converted it from an Apple to a PowerPoint, a little bit of it lagged behind. But Amon Overton was one of the founders of this Holly Springs School. And if you Google Holly Springs School history, you should be able to find that document. It's really interesting. I think it's Liberty Shields Press, but I'm not quite sure what that is. But it's a wonderful history of the Holly Springs School. Okay. All right. And here's something else from a land deed in the van collection. And this is the sale of land in 1867. And the more you read this writing, the easier it becomes. And from my experience, when you come to a word you don't know what it is, my first guess is usually the right one. But sometimes it's not, okay? Oh, and then see, you do have some Hertford County wills that have been transcribed. Okay. And so see how much easier that is? And you can go to the original will if you can find it, and if you want to check on something. Okay? All right, now we're getting over toward Mount Tabor now. This is Clifton Lyles Brett and Mariah Curl. He was one of the founders of Mount Tabor, and he's on my, I know what y'all are laughing.
He's on ours too.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Or she is.
And anyway, he lived at the Gut Farm, and you go right past the church and take that first left, and there's the Gut Road, which might back up to your property. And I've been down there and have never been able to find any, well, I found a cemetery, and they are not these folks, but they're a little younger. But I can't find any of their graves. And there's no sign of the old house back there. But okay. And y'all, that picture I found on Ancestry. I didn't have it, but certainly needed one more picture. All right, and here's his death. And he was buried at Mount Tabor. And Mount Tabor's about 1835. And well, he was the next to the oldest member in Mount Tabor Church when he died. And he was a good man, too. So, all right.
Excuse me, is that B-R-E-T-T or B-R-I-T-T or?
Same difference.
Okay, thank you.
This is spelled with an E in the obituary.
Okay.
All right, now,
When did you say Mount Tabor was founded, about 18?
we're getting to this slide. It's about 1835. Now, land grants, these are called shucks. And here is where Amon Overton in Hertford County got a grant of 380 acres in 1835. And it says the location's on the east side of the flat swamp. So, and there are the Granville grants, and then there are state land grants. And, you know, we were a proprietary colony, and the king gave the land in the Carolinas to his 8 friends, the 8 Lord Proprietors. And then the Lord Proprietors started selling the land off. And the king said, you know, I gave this to you as a gift. You're selling that land, and you're making money off of my gift. I want my land back. And all the proprietors gave their land back except the Lord Granville. We fall into the Granville grants. And Lord Granville never came over here, but he had land agents. One of his land agents was in Edenton at the Kupla House. So Daddy's people, when they wanted land in Chowan County, you'd go around and find land that was unclaimed or unsold. You'd go to the proprietor's office, the land agent's office, and you would have that land surveyed, you would register it, and you would pay for it. All right, then there's a thing known as state grants. And because of this year, 1835, I think this is probably a state grant. All right, Mount Tabor Church, not Mount Tabor, Buckhorn at Como. That beautiful church right there in the middle of Como, that's where all of Mother's, a bunch of Mother's people went. I can go in the cemetery, I'm kin to 95% of those folks in the graveyard there. All right.
John, on the Husker Coalfield Road, there is 2 miles out of Coalfield, a swamp on the map that's shown as flat swamp.
Oh, really?
It's near Brantley's Grove.
Oh, okay.
It's long been called flat swamp.
Really? Okay, I didn't know that.
It's part of Forest and Flat Drainage District presently. And
Yeah.
that is the flat swamp there.
Oh, okay.
And the hunters named it Buck James's Bottom after a cousin of mine.
Did you see if it was on that map up there? Check before you leave.
I know this map.
Oh, okay.
I know, and the swamp is on the map.
Okay, great. All right, let's take Buckhorn Baptist Church. That was an Anglican chapel. And one of the things that had such a devastating effect on the Anglican Church was the American Revolution. And a lot of those little Anglican churches were small. I mean, think of the church in Gatesville, the church here, you know, Windsor, all those little small Episcopal churches. Well, there was a small Anglican chapel at Buckhorn. And then after the American Revolution, A lot of those churches were in disrepair. The people didn't have money to maintain them. And so that chapel at Buckhorn became abandoned. And it was just sitting there. And then this is when the Great Awakening was coming in. And a lot of people became Baptists and Methodists. And so one of my greats back there, he and some other people in the community applied to the state of North Carolina for that land, and it was granted in a state grant to those folks. And then the Anglican chapel becomes Buckhorn Baptist Church because it was abandoned. So these are the land grant shucks that are great information, okay? All right, now, this is real brief. There's a certain thing called the Southern Claims Commission, which I never knew much about until about 5 years ago. In 1870, after the Civil War, if you had property that had been taken or confiscated, you could apply to the federal government to be paid for what had been taken from you. And it just depends on the person how much information's there. And so here is Amon Overton from Hertford County, who makes a claim in 1873 and for remuneration for what was taken from him. A lot of the times it was horses or carts or contents of the smokehouses or something like that. And and with him, I found out it was denied. And then on my ward side, lo and behold, I found all the affidavits. My great-grandfather, Anderson Ward, and his brother were riding along Country Road one day in Chowan County, and lo and behold, Union troops show up, and they took his horse and cart. And so then he applies to the Southern Claims Commission for repayment, and they said, and I've got all the documentation on that side, and it said, since your son was serving in the Confederate Troops of America, request denied. But there's another site called Fold 3 that you can look at military collections. Fold 3 looks like it's really easy to use, but I don't think it's that easy to use. But it was on Fold 3 that I found all this documentation on my ward side with the Southern Claims Commission. Okay, we haven't burned one yet, but it's going to happen real soon. All right, here's Buckhorn. Okay, 1835, and here's the early building at Buckhorn. And I bet some of y'all, we've got some kinfolks out here in this crowd. Okay, all right, let's go to Mount Tabor, and here's Mount Tabor's 1839, so they were very close. Now, Libby. Yes. All right. I was at Archives, and the church records for Buckhorn and Mount Tabor are at State Archives. They've been microfilmed. And I'm going to make a copy of all the Mount Tabor records. I copied them, send them to you, Libby. All right. I started to bring them today, but I haven't had a chance to punch holes in them. And I was looking at the old parish register, and it's, look, no page numbers. And you're sitting there and you print, and then I knew I was getting some pages mixed up, and then I went back the second day with all my copy, and I was trying to match the copy in my lap with the screen, and finally I just got too confused, and that's another day's work. But here's my curl. Oh, and then you've got certain people that were expelled And then here's some McGlones up in here somewhere. Here's McGlone. And here's the Brit, the B-R-I-T-T. Okay, Libby. All right, but now look what else is at Meharry and McTaber. Blacks. And it lists the black members of those two churches, which is just a great resource. And, okay. Oh, that's my great-grandmother and my grandmother and her three brothers. And that was at Mount Tabor at a 4th of July celebration. But she's in mourning. All right. All right, now, I talked about newspapers.com. All right, now these are just a few of the things that we're going through these sort of quickly. I found about Winton when I was just looking in general. Lots for sale in Winton in 1843. Okay. And here's about the road will cross the Choyne River at Winton, 2 miles above the North and Carolina Road. Okay, that's 1892.
What does that, excuse me, I'm sorry.
What?
Hold on. What does that say, the Murfreesboro
Index.
Thank you.
That North Carolina Road is the Atlantic Railroad.
All right, and
That's for,
Thank you.
that's for the railroad crossing, not the bridge yet. The bridge isn't. until
yeah, it's a railroad,
1920s.
yeah.
Okay, ready to go?
Okay, yes.
Thank you, sir.
All right, and then here is Warden's Normal School and Winton Academy. You know, this in May you start getting articles about graduations, and so here you can pick up some good local history. And then another thing. Newspapers.com's searches is the Biblical Recorder. All right, Libby. And then I found a bunch of articles about Winton Baptist Church and new preachers coming. Okay. Oh, and here's where the post office is blown up. Y'all had a lot of post office instances over here. It was robbed and so forth. Okay.
The postmaster was J.B. Cotus, C.O.T.
Oh, okay. And here's about Winton Baptist Church in 1915. Okay. All right, and here's a big parade y'all had, the Soldiers Parade in 1917. And, all right, now this is John Downs with the hat on, and some of my McGlones. It's always been a little hard for me to place the McGlones in there because I never really knew any of them. And so, anyway, but that's an old tin type. Okay. All right, now we're going to burn Winton. All right, so it was burned February 20th, 1862. I thought it was just, I hate to say it so simply, a one-day affair. I thought it just, the Union soldiers came up here and burned it, but it wasn't. It involved more than one day. And what had happened, the Union soldiers occupied Roanoke Island. Then after Roanoke Island fell, they came in and occupied Elizabeth City. And once Elizabeth City was lost, that opened up all the rivers and waterways up to the Union troops. And so, and this is right at the beginning of the war. So, living. And then, you know, at Potty Casey Creek there, the earthworks over there. Okay. All right. And this is from 1862. They wanted 400 free Negroes to work on fortifications. And then I happened to be looking at this, and I thought, I know who this fella is. He used to go to my church back during the Civil War, and he, Lawrence Branch, he was Brigadier General. Actually, there's a memorial window in my church to this guy. And, all right.
You mean your Raleigh church?
What?
Your Raleigh church?
Yeah, my Raleigh church, yeah. Okay. Burning of Winton, yeah. All right. And, now there are different sort of versions of the story as appeared in different papers. This is about the succession. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. What happened? The Union troops had heard that 500 citizens had gathered at Winton and had raised the American flag, and they were waiting for the Union troops to come help them out. Well, then the Confederate troops came into town and confiscated tons of properties, and then they hid, the Confederate troops hid themselves on top of the bluffs down here. All right, and then there were 8 Union gunboats that were coming up the river to the wharf down here at the river. And so then the pilot of the lead boat was a North Carolinian and had sailed the Chowan River a number of times and knew the river well. And the federal officer, everything looked calm and quiet. And then it was in February and it was towards sunset, and one of the Union officers looked up on the bluff and something caught the light, and it was a reflection off of a gun. And then he said, stop the boats, we gotta turn back. There are Confederates all up there. And then they started firing on them, and they retreated. And then they went back down the river, and they put iron sidings around the boats and put kindling on the boat decks. And then they came back the next day. They left at 8:30 down the river and got here about noon. And then, go to the next slide. That's the burning, okay. Oh, and this is Captain Smith of Gates County, goes to Suffolk, and he talks about the bombardment and talks about how they could hear it in Suffolk. Okay? The boats, all right. All right, so there's another account. Let's move on. Okay, now this one's a little more interesting. The Yankees came up to Winton on Thursday with 6 gunboats and 10 transports, and after throwing a good many shells, landed about 1,500 men and proceeded to rob and plunder. Did they ever rob without plundering? The place. They carried off whatever they could conveniently. They stole ladies' and children's clothing, bedclothes, and threw beds in the streets and burnt them. They broke up furniture, then proceeded to burn up such of the buildings as were the lower part of the town. The principal sufferers were Captain P. Jordan, Ms. John Anderson, James Northcutt, Ms. Hazley, and Dr. Shields. Most of the others were rifled of their contents. So the Confederates were occupying the town, and they hired a bunch of horses from the local owners. The Confederates did anyway. So then it gets on to the let every man buckle his armor and that language at the bottom there. Okay. Oh, now this one. Look at that first line. What killed him?
The papers.
The papers. Charles Henry Foster, who was reported killed at Winton by Southern papers. Okay, I just thought that was funny, all right. Yeah.
It was reported in the Southern papers that he was killed.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Yeah. And then, so the Union troops come into town and they determined which of the citizens had helped the Confederate troops. And those properties were marked and then they were burned. And then, right down by the courthouse, there were barrels of tar that were in storage. They rolled the barrels up into the courthouse and lit fire to them. And then, y'all probably heard about the two prisoners that were caught locked in jail there. And the courthouse was burning, and some Union troops axed the door to let them out. And but now, with the properties that were destroyed, it would be interesting to see with the Southern Claims Commission if any of those owners applied for remuneration for their destroyed property. Okay, so, oh, and it said, I hate to pick on Miss Anderson, but it said they emptied her house, and then they were having a hard time making her leave because many of the citizens of Winton left and went to the woods or to a neighboring farm or something. And Miss Anderson did not want to go, and she had her cart packed, and finally they threw her in the cart and hauled her off. And it said 14 of her slaves took the big old piano out of the house and into the woods and burned it. And so, okay.
John, they saved that piano, and the Story family still has it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going by the newspaper.
Fake news.
Okay, and you know, I wonder when this reached the papers in the north and St. Louis and all up there, if they had any idea where Winton was, you know. Okay, all right, Libby. Okay, but anyway, it just, all of this was part of the Burnside expedition, okay. And then, all right, now, we're finishing right here. I've got a project for y'all. I found out at archives, these are the church records that are at archives that they will sell copies of before. You just need access to a microfilm reader. So they will copy a roll for about $15 a roll. And here's Meharan, First Baptist Ahoskie, another, and First Baptist again, and go to the next one, please. And then Murfreesboro Methodist and Basnock Methodist and Murfreesboro Baptist. And of course, Mount Tabor is one of those. a great project would be to take the Mount Tabor records and transcribe them. And our friend Diane, I bet, would love to have a transcription of that in the North Carolina Genealogical Review.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great community project. Okay, and here's the courthouse that was here when Winton was burned. We burned Winton and we're gonna leave it in ashes. And so if some of y'all are Overtons or Downs or know my connection, to explain it to me, I'd love to meet you, and I'd love to meet you if you don't. So, but thank you for letting me come and chat. And Libby?
Yeah, there's one more slide.
I want to thank John for coming today and sharing his talents with us. We do have Bud Jones is coming up in just a minute, but I want to remind you we have refreshments in the back. There are restrooms in the back as well. You're welcome to stay, to talk, to visit, to share information. Bud?
Thank you.
Oh,
A very,
most gracious.
a very small honorarium.
Oh, thank you so much.
One Pepsi and a honey bun.
So thank you. If anyone wants to become a member of the Winton Historical Association, I have the information in my hand, okay? All right.
Are you taking questions?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I don't want to keep you here all afternoon, but just ask me individually.
Come back here. All right.
Okay.
Correct.
Do you have any records on the founding of Coalfield, 1896?
No, I've not looked in newspapers.
When the train came through and the post office was formed.
Yeah.
And secondly, does anybody know who Sally Archer was?
Thank you.
I have no idea.
Because it shows up on that map, Sally Archer's
Yeah.
Crossroads. And that's the previous name of Coalfield.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Okay.
I was hoping some of y'all might know that. Anybody else have a question, or you can catch me afterwards. Thank you.